Tom DeVore, thanks for joining us, and we're going to be discussing the recent Illinois weapons ban that was just passed and signed into law here in Illinois. And you are the former Attorney General candidate on the Republican ticket. You were not successful in your race this past November, but you are involved in a lawsuit that you just brought against this new law. Tell us what your lawsuit says and just kind of give us an update. I know you were in court yesterday regarding this. Where does that stand? And for background, too, if you could incorporate, what does this law do that you object to?
Well, I'll start with the law itself. House Bill 5471. House Bill 5471 started in January of 2022 as a one-paragraph change to the insurance code saying, for all intents and purposes, that insurance adjusters had to give their email and some other information to people in a claim contract. It went through the House, all three readings of the House, passed the House, went to the Senate, had two readings in the Senate, and then on January 8th, 2 days before its passage, Don Harmon, president of the Senate, gutted it and replaced it with this, what we'll call assault weapons ban. And those are their words, they're not mine. They called it assault weapons ban. The governor signed it 2 days later. So for 347 days, it existed in the General Assembly. For 345 days, it was an amendment to the insurance code. Then it changed to the assault weapons ban. What it does, simply saying, is that from that day the governor signed it forward, citizens, unless you're exempt, can no longer buy 170 approximately types of weapons that I'll call semi-automatic weapons. Call it an AR-15. They want to call an assault weapon. I call them semi-automatic weapons. They can use their vernacular if it makes them happy. And you can't buy them anymore unless you're exempt. 90 days from the date the governor signed that law, you can no longer possess that weapon that you might have owned prior to this law, because those that you own prior are treated a little differently. You can only possess it if one of two things happens. By January 1st, 2024, you sign what's called an endorsement affidavit that you sign under oath. Here's my name, my address, the make, model, and serial number of this weapon, and you turn it in. And then you can only possess that weapon on your own personal property, on the personal property of another person who gives you permission, or at a shooting range or a gun dealer that's working on it. That's what the law did. It exempted out tens of thousands of people from having to comply with this law, which means they're free to buy all of the assault weapons they want. They're free to buy all the 50 caliber rifles they want, all the 50 caliber ammunition that they want, all the high capacity magazines they want, at will. You just have to be a current or retired cop. You have to be a prison guard, a county jailer, a prison warden, a prison superintendent, a current, not retired, member of the armed forces, and there's a few other security detail people that can do it too. You're exempt. You're not included in this law at all. So that's what the law was that was passed.
And do you know what the reasoning was that they exempted those people?
I don't know, because and not only do I not know the reasoning, I don't know why they passed the law. And people will always want to speculate, but this is something important to appreciate because we argued it in court. When you want to know what is the intent of a law, why is your legislature passing this law? What public purpose are they trying to then further? You look to the legislative process to figure out what that is. You look into the record of your public general assembly and you find out what it was. It doesn't exist in this law because, as I told you, for 345 days, it was merely an insurance modification under the insurance code. So there is no purpose being furthered. Moreover, you can't glean from that, why did they exempt out all of these particular persons? Was the purpose of the legislation furthered by the exemption, right? Because you can only determine whether the exemption is appropriate, Terry, if you know why they passed the law in the first place. And you don't have any of that information. Now, I do know, because I've talked to people at very high levels in the state of Illinois, and I can't come into a courtroom pontificating it because it just wouldn't be appropriate, is that the public unions were successful in accomplishing this. Because if you look at the classifications of those who have been exempt, they belong to very powerful unions. And so I've been told from people that would presumably know that they did a really good job of lobbying the legislature to exclude them out from being involved. If you're looking for a legitimate reason why they were exempted out and as to what purpose was being furthered by this law, you can't find it because none of that information is in the record whatsoever.
You were in court yesterday. You're in the midst of this legal process, challenging it. Can you share with us what is the specific challenge points that you're going to challenge the constitutionality of the law on?
Certainly. In the state court case, and I'm really the only one on behalf of my clients that have raised this in the state courts.
Now, and can I interrupt, Tom, just when you say your clients, is this a class action lawsuit or do you have specifically some clients?
I have 866 clients.
Okay.
And they are specifically enumerated in this lawsuit. The judge kind of chuckled yesterday when he says, "Yes, Mr. DeVore, I have your list of clients," because it's like 20 pages.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's 866 clients in the state court case. And we will move to the federal court too. There's no doubt about that. But these state court issues that we've raised have to be addressed, and now's the time to address them. A couple of them are, the first two that I'll tell you are, again, they're more general in nature, but they're very important, deal with the procedural way that this law was passed. And we have in our Illinois Constitution what's called a single subject rule, and we have the 3 readings rule. We've argued that both of those have been violated. There's really no doubt that they've been violated. I think at least for the 3 readings rule, the General Assembly acknowledges they violated. They just tell people there's nothing you can do about it. And then we've also argued under separate provisions of the Illinois Constitution, the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause. So 4 different legal arguments regarding the Illinois Constitution.
And as we said, you were a Republican running for Attorney General this past November. When the governor signed it, and I'm going to play for the audience so they can hear what the governor is saying about this and then get your response, because he's intimating without naming you that there might be some grandstanding going on. So let's take a listen and we'll come back and have a talk about it.
You don't get to choose which laws you comply with in the state of Illinois. Let's be clear. The fact is that, yes, there are, of course, people who are trying to politically grandstand, who want to make a name for themselves by claiming that they will not comply. But the reality is that the state police is responsible for enforcement, as are all law enforcement all across this state. And they will, in fact, do their job, or they won't be in their job. They're going to try to take this to court. So, my reaction, of course, is this is a constitutional bill. The law here that we now have enacted is constitutional. There was a lot of thought that went into it to make sure that it would be. And obviously, things will go through the courts and they'll make their determinations, but I feel very confident.
So, Tom, are you grandstanding, or is this based upon the principles of the law?
Well, when I heard, I now have referred to Governor Pritzker. I always say that he always engages in his situational blowhardedness. So he's always looking for that situation to where he can be a blowhard, And he's the governor. He's got a bully pulpit. He doesn't use it very well, but that's what he does. I don't know who he was talking about. Was he talking about me? Was he talking about the state's attorneys across the state who said they're not going to do it? I don't know. I don't care. That really doesn't matter to me what he does. So I don't know. The fact of the matter is that there's nothing he can do about it. The sheriffs of the state of Illinois, all 102 of them, are constitutional officers. They're elected by the people of their county as a constitutional office. Governor can't do anything to them. So he can sit there and say all he wants of what he's going to do. Can he threaten Brendan Kelly, the director of Illinois State Police, to go out here and try to force his state police officers to do something they don't want to? He might. I mean, I've talked to tons of state police troopers who've said that they're not going to mess with any of this, but their bosses are trying to make them because the governor is going to threaten people. That's all he is good at threatening people. No, he can't do anything to him.
I was going to say, when he said if they don't do their job, talking basically for those who aren't following this, there's 102 counties in Illinois. The preponderance of the sheriffs in each county have said they're not going to enforce the law. So the governor was saying they got to enforce the law, or they won't have their jobs. And you're right; these people are elected in their own right. They don't work for the governor. Now the state police work for the governor. I mean, they're part of the executive branch.
Certainly.
But
and
have you
here's what
talked to the prosecuting attorneys and some of these states' attorneys, and what are they saying? Because I think people have maybe heard about the sheriffs. They haven't necessarily heard as much about what the state's attorneys are saying.
I mean, one of the state's attorneys right here next to me in Montgomery County, who I know well, he issued a press release, says, I'm not prosecuting anybody under this law. And you know what? There's nothing Pritzker can do about it. And what Pritzker doesn't say, I don't know if he's stupid or he just engaging in his situational blowhardedness, is there's laws every day that prosecutors don't prosecute. There's laws that law enforcement don't investigate or charge people for. It happens every day. They exercise that discretion in the ways that they see fit. And just because he doesn't like it, there's nothing he can do about it. What is he's going to do? He's going to send state troopers into people's houses across these counties, contrary to these sheriffs? Is he going to start chaos? Is that what he's going to do? So this mass disobedience, assuming this law is not struck down, which I'm confident that it will be, and this mass disobedience engages, what's he think he's going to do? Really, what is he, try it. You want to be, he's already a tyrant by definition. So does he want to take it to that step and try that? It'll blow up in his face. So.
And we have other people who would say about the governor and some others, as far as not following the law, Governor, you yourself have declared Illinois a sanctuary state. You have declared that you're not going to enforce some of the federal regulations, and you're not going to work with federal law enforcement as far as illegal immigrants in the state of Illinois. So
it's hypocrisy.
Critics are saying that the governor himself chooses which laws he's going to enforce and which ones he will not.
And you know what? To that extent, if that's what the governor chooses to do, I don't personally agree with it, but I understand it, that he's going to prioritize what he thinks should be. The president of the United States does that, right? And the priorities of President Biden are certainly different than they were President Trump. But, for the governor to sit there and pontificate, I, in my position, can prioritize what I want to do, but you're going to listen to me because I'm telling you have to, they're just going to laugh at him and tell him to pound sand.
Yeah, prosecutorial discretion here where people can or cannot. Do we have any great precedent that you're going to particularly rely on as far as trying to argue that this is unconstitutional? You talked about part of the objection is based on the way the law was passed, that it broke the procedures which were supposed to have been established. What about on the Second Amendment? If I can bring this up, we have here a copy of the Second Amendment, which some people are familiar with, others not. Pro-gun people often cite the second part here, the second clause, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And the U.S. Supreme Court, I believe, has already ruled that that means that it's individuals and that you don't have to be part of a militia. So apparently this is infringing, as is the FOID card in Illinois. But
well, the FOID's a different conversation. But as to the law we're talking about right now, the decision that just came out of the United States Supreme Court last year called Bruin, it's the New York State Rifle Association v. Bruin, completely changed the jurisprudence of Second Amendment analysis nationwide significantly, to the benefit of citizens, I should say. But it completely altered everything. So when you have a lot of cases over the last 10, 20 years that have developed across the federal courts in the United States dealing with balancing the interest of government against the rights of citizens, all of that's out the window now, Terry. It's gone. And Bruin becomes a very high threshold of determining whether or not a regulation on firearms violates the Second Amendment. And pretty much what it does, I'm giving you an oversimplification, but it's pretty accurate, is that you have to look at that regulation and see if that regulation comports to the history and traditions of this nation. And categorical bans on weapons that are commonly owned right now, which is appropriate, and across the nation they're owned in the millions, is there any history or tradition that says banning the outright ability to own those is appropriate? No, there's not. Now, governor's trying to be clever and say, well, we're not banning that you can't own them. If you own them before the law, you can still own them if you give us a registry. Is a registry a historical and traditional way of regulating firearms? No, it's never been heard of. So, in my opinion, these are this whole law is going to fail in the federal courts under Bruin.
I should have asked, did you file in the state court or federal court?
State court. The federal court's coming, but these state court issues that we've raised are just as important, and that's why I raised them there, because they have to be addressed.
And can you,
in the long run, we have to address them.
Can you give us is there any timeline we might anticipate as far as when some of these next steps are going to happen?
Well, the judge is waiting right now for me actually for a proposed order on the request for restraining order we asked for, which would apply to, in the short run, 866 plaintiffs that I represent. But we're asking during the interim, while this case is proceeding through the court, that this law not apply to them, and we're asking that they be treated no better or no worse than the tens of thousands of exempt persons that have been exempt from this law. So that's what we're asking for right now. The judge will rule by tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and then we will proceed through the court as expeditiously as we can to get to a ruling on these issues for they can move on to the appellate court.
And when we say tomorrow, that's January 21 for those watching this later of 2023. What is the effective date? He signed the bill. When is the effective date of the law?
January 10th.
Of this year?
2023, yes.
Okay,
sir.
so it's in effect now.
It is in effect right now.
Okay. Before we close out, is there anything else? I know you're a busy man. You're talking to media across the country as well as you have to file your paperwork with the judge. Is there anything else before we close out you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered it all. Like I said, I'm confident this bill is going to fail, but ultimately for the people of the state of Illinois, they've got a longer road than just dealing with this piece of legislation. I mean, they just presented a bill in the General Assembly 10 days ago where they're trying to restrict the ability for people to procure ammunition. So this stuff's never going to end until there's some ability to limit the number of Democrats that we have in the General Assembly that Pritzker can control with his pocketbook. So that's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah, we should say for those who are out of the state, the legislature, the governor's from Chicago, the legislature is predominantly from the Chicagoland area, and there's a huge cultural divide in the attitudes of these issues between the Chicago folks and those in other parts of the state, and that's what we see here, number one. Lastly, if someone wants to follow you, is there some source of information, a website or something else they could go to?
Yeah, we have a website at DeVoreLawOffices.com. I'm on social media, on Twitter, Thomas DeVore, Facebook, Thomas DeVore, and then I think even an Instagram. So I use the Instagram the least, which is, I understand, the youngsters really like that one, so I might have to migrate there more. But yeah, we have a website and all the social media as well. We keep people up to date on what we're doing.
Great. Well, Tom DeVore, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much, and we'll follow up with you.
All right, sir.
Take care. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.